Hi there. Welcome to A New Way to Museum. My name is David Levering. I run the science camps at the Sternberg, as well as our virtual museum on GatherTown. In this series of videos, we're going to be taking a tour of some parts of the virtual museum, and we will also be talking with some Sternberg Museum staff, as well as some outside paleontologists about their work, some of the work that they do that involves the Sternberg Museum, and generally have a good time exploring paleontology in this virtual world. This week, our guest is Dr. Aly Baumgartner, Paleontology Collections Manager at the Sternberg Museum. Let's go say hi. Oh, hi there, Dr. Baumgartner. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm just checking out this Actinosaurus in this cabinet here.
Okay, let's take a look. So I see some reasonably sized teeth. I see a scale bar. So this looks like it's not a small animal, and some paddle hands, I think, up in the front. Can you kind of describe for the folks seeing this what an actinosaur is?
So, Actinosaurus is a type of mosasaur, so one of those big marine reptiles that was around in Kansas during the Cretaceous in the Western Interior Seaway. So, they are related to like monitor lizards. So if monitor lizards decide to go back to the sea, you would end up with something that looks like a mosasaur. So they have these long, narrow bodies, these big paddles that they can use to swim, and big honking teeth. This one in particular is really neat. It is what's called a neotype because the original holotype that was stored in Germany was destroyed during World War II. The museum was bombed, the specimen is gone. And so they named a neotype, which is basically a new replacement for the destroyed specimen. This one was actually nicer than the one that it was destroyed, so I take that as a win. But yes, so this is Actinosaurus cleidostoides.
And what is the significance of like a holotype versus a neotype? Like, why is that important in paleontology?
So the whole point of a type is that it is the one used for comparison. So a holotype is basically like the prime example of a species. If you are a paleontologist and you are trying to determine whether or not a specimen is an existing species that we already know about or a new thing that we've never described before, you would do that by looking at the holotype. So the holotype is what we use to describe the species. And so it's really important that we keep those safe. We have a handful of holotypes here at the Sternberg Museum, and they have like cards and stickers and special designations in the database to make sure that we know, hey, this one's really important. But sometimes things happen, right? You know, sometimes buildings get bombed in wars and the specimen is gone. And so if that happens, you will assign what's called a neotype. So it is the new type specimen. So if people wanted to compare Actinosaurus, they would come here to look at our specimen before they figured out, is this something new?
Now, what if somebody found something they thought was an actinosaurus, but it was like twice as complete and had like skin impressions, which is a beautiful, amazing fossil, and they came and compared it to the one that is at the Sternberg Museum, and they determined that it is the same species. If that other one is more complete, does it then become the type, or does the type stay with this original one?
So there
Or
can
this
only be
neotype, I
one type.
guess.
Yes,
Okay.
there can only be one type. It is often the first thing that is found. That is when you describe a species, you assign a holotype, and so it is not uncommon for better specimens to be uncovered later.
Mm-hmm.
They will not. You will never change what the holotype is,
Okay.
though. I would still recommend looking at the nicer
Sure.
ones. But in terms of like the official designation, the only way that a holotype will not be a holotype is if it is destroyed
Right.
or if the species is disbanded. We realized it
Okay.
was something else altogether. Yeah.
So it gets like it turned out to be a female and it just gets
Yes.
squished in with something else. Like, oh, it was a female of a different species. So,
Yeah. So we actually have a couple of specimens here that were previously assigned as a holotype for a species that it turned out that someone was just being a little bit too nitpicky with differences
mhm.
that they turned out not to be the same species, but they are still exceptional specimens. That's why they were assigned a holotype in the first place. We actually will, though they're not marked as holotypes, like they're not given the fancy sticker and everything, we'll still make a note of that in our database just
Mhm.
because like it helps maintain the history of the specimen and you know, who knows? Maybe someone one day will go back and resurrect the species. So we got to make sure we know who's who.
Can only hope. So,
Yes.
at the Sternberg Museum, you are the collections manager. And so, if you could tell folks kind of how you came into this career path of working in collections, like were there any big formative moments that you can look back on and share with folks?
Ooh, love this. Okay, yes. So I am a collections manager. I basically am a fossil librarian. My responsibility is knowing what we have and where it is. So I have been interested in paleontology broadly, basically as long as I can remember. I have a all about me book that I wrote in first grade that says I wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up. So this is what I wanted to do for as long as I can remember. I remember when I was a child, we went to the AMNH, the
Mhm.
American Museum of Natural History, and I saw what I called the dancing dinosaurs in the lobby, which they're not dancing, they are fighting to the death. But I thought it was absolutely amazing. And so I've always been a fan of paleontology, but I've always had this like secret love of museums. And when I was an undergrad, I started working as a tour guide at the Natural History Museum at the University of Michigan. And doing that was really what made me realize that this is what I want to do with my life. Because I got to give tours to the public, which was super fun. You know, talking about our collection and showing people mammoths and mastodons and that sort of stuff. But once a year, we would do these behind the scenes tours, and we
Mhm.
would take people through the collections. And there is nothing that like gets me excited in the same way, like the same way that a wet collection of like fish does. Like when you go in and you see all the drawers and all of the cabinets and all of the jars of like clear and stained fish. Oh man, that's just the coolest thing to me. Not my job, but I like they're across the hallway. I can go
Right,
see
you
them if
visit
I
them whenever
want.
you want. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But like I knew that like the fact that the behind the scenes, there's just so much more. Um, I would go down. The paleontology collections used to be in the basement before they got a new museum, and so like you'd have to like turn on the lights as you went through the collections. It's actually kind of the same way here, and just it really gets in your head like the amount of imagination that like you see these bones, like you can remember what these things like imagine what these things were like when they were alive. And so basically throughout my like academic career, I used every excuse that I could to work in a museum. So I worked in the fossil prep lab and as a tour guide when I was an undergrad at the University of Michigan. When I went and did my master's at East Tennessee State, I volunteered in the prep lab
Mhm.
and I did outreach at the museum. Like you couldn't get me away from museums. And during my dissertation, when I was doing my PhD, I didn't get as many opportunities to like work in museums in Texas, but all of my dissertation was museum based. So
Mhm.
I spent so much time in museums. And so going through the museum at the National Museums of Kenya, working in the paleontology collections there, like there was no doubt in my mind that this was exactly what I wanted to do. And as a grad student, when it came to the point where I needed to decide what sort of job I wanted,
Right.
I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay in academia and become a professor and do that sort of thing, or do I want to work in museums? And there was no thinking about it. Like, obviously, I was going to do the museum thing, and yeah. And the nice thing too is that one of the things that I ran into when I was applying for jobs is that I am very well rounded as a paleontologist.
Yeah.
Because originally I wanted to be a vertebrate paleontologist. It was mammoths and mastodons. They were my first love. But like when I was taking paleontology classes at the University of Michigan, Michigan was underwater. Like there's during a lot of the Paleozoic. So like the Michigan Basin, Petoskey stones,
Right.
which is the state stone. It's a coral. It's a fossil coral. Like I grew up around invertebrates, and a lot of like my coursework talked about invertebrate paleontology. And I ended up teaching invertebrate paleontology when I was a grad student at Baylor. But even though I had that animal background, my training is in paleobotany.
Right.
So I collected the whole set. I got plants, I got animals with and without backbones, and that's been really useful and really fun for me, is that I do have such a wide ranging appreciation. And even though most of the time I'm working with the dead stuff, like every so often I get to work with the more recently dead things,
Right.
which is also really fun. But yeah, basically I just like dead things, recently dead and not so recently dead.
To get you the fossil soil, so you can get the full brimmed hat trick.
So I actually took every fossil soils class that was offered during my PhD.
There you go. All right.
Because plants grow in dirt. It was really useful.
Plus, you have root traces and things like that
Exactly.
can be quite handy
Exactly.
for understanding the broader ecosystem.
For sure. And that's actually one of the really nice things, like when I was doing field work for my dissertation, it was like, okay, because I have this background in invertebrate paleontology, I've done paleopedology, so I've worked with fossil soils. Like, it does make it easier to be a time traveler because I can read all the evidence that's in front of me. So like I can look at the soil and be like, oh, this is a fossil vertisol. That means we have shrinking and swelling. So that's going to tell us something about the seasonality of the location. Right. And that's super fun. I like being a time traveler.
So we're down here in this virtual natural history museum basement. Can you give folks some insight into how close or how not close this might be to actually being in the often termed dungeon of the museum?
So first up, though I really appreciate the aesthetic of the cobwebs in the virtual museum, that would not fly in the
You all clean up a bit more often than that, I imagine.
Yes, well, especially considering that we do have a pest protocol, because though, insects and, spiders or whatever aren't going to bother my fossils, because they're mostly rocks, that is a problem for the zoology collections, which are next door, and the last thing I want is for it to be my fault if, Curtis's collection gets eaten. Other than that, honestly, it's a bit reminiscent. There's no windows, which is definitely true. There's no natural light down here. I have no idea what the weather is outside. The fact that you have, my walls aren't falling apart, which is good.
That's good.
The thing that
we'll fix that later.
Yes. The thing I find very funny is just the desk with bones strewn across it, and that checks out. There was a bison skull sitting on the desk next to the computer for months, which is literally what I see here. So I mean, in many ways, this is pretty accurate. I have more specimen cabinets and fewer crates, but we do have a crate. We have 2 crates down there, so
Now, what's the ratio of secret rope ladders and tunnels to other parts of the museum, or can you not disclose that publicly.
I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of secret rope ladders, but the funny thing about the collection space is that there are a lot more doors than people think. So there are actually 4 doors in and out of the collections. There's one at the top, 2 in the middle, and 1 at the bottom. But that also means that like constantly people are coming in to find me and going through a door that I do not anticipate. So it feels a little bit like there are secret entrances to the collection.
And you're in a bit of a catacomb down there anyway, where all the rest of the collection's facilities are.
Yes. So it's funny. I was talking to a visiting researcher, and people always say that because the museum is a dome, it's harder to get lost. And I disagree with that. I think that because it's a dome, it is easier to get lost because like you're gonna literally go in circles if you're not careful. Fortunately, you do run into doors that are locked, so that like that's a good indication that like, oh, I have gone the wrong way.
Gone too far.
I can go no further. But yeah, when I first got here, I had been here for a couple weeks when the museum director he was like, let me show you where things are, and he took me down a hallway I didn't know existed, which was good because then I knew where the tornado shelter was.
Oh yes,
which is important. We're in Kansas.
Yeah, just that little alcove full of benches.
Yes.
So and we can put an image of it up here on the screen. Do you have a favorite fossil in the museum collections that maybe you think doesn't get enough love?
Yes, I definitely do. My favorite fossil is one of the first fossils that I met here. So when I started my position in July of 2020, I basically was shown to the collection and was told, okay, have fun. So obviously the first thing I did was start opening drawers and cabinets and like, what on earth do we have in here? And I opened up a cabinet, opened up a drawer, and there was a fish face looking back at me, a 3-dimensional fish face looking back at me. And anytime someone asks me what my favorite fossil is, like that's always the first thing that comes to mind is the fish face. So it is the holotype of Benenagmius elacensis, and it is, golly, I love that. I love that fish so much. There was a researcher who came and worked on it like a month or 2 ago, and I was so excited that someone was going to be paying attention to my baby. But it's really like it's really big, and it's 3-dimensionally preserved, so you can see. Like that's one of the things I like about those kinds of fossils. Like I really like the fossils where it requires zero imagination. We know what its face looked like because that's like we could see it. But yeah, Benenagmius elacensis. I also think it's funny because the first part of the name is banana, and that also amuses me every time.
Now, when you found it, like, is the fossil banana shaped, or where is that name derived from?
I have no idea why it's called that. It is not. It's more torpedo shaped than banana shaped. But if you go on to Wikipedia, the reconstruction of the fish on Wikipedia is actually really cool. It's very colorful. Apparently it's related to, or they reconstructed it to look vaguely like a sailfish, which is kind of neat.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. But and then elacensis, named for Ellis County, where we are here in Kansas. But yeah, Benenagmius elacensis, the holotype, FHSM VP 2118. It's my favorite. A runner-up would be FHSM VP 18.
Now you're just showing off.
I am a cool kid. It's not a shovel tusk elephant. It is a spoonbill elephant. So it's a type of mastodon that had these, just this like exaggerated lower jaw. And one of my favorite pictures of this jaw is with one of the grad students, Shyla, sitting next to it. And when she is sitting next to it, the jaw is longer than like her legs are long. It's really big.
Yeah.
We have a jaw from that. We have teeth from that. We have a tusk from that. Also a holotype. Which is why I tend to remember the numbers of the holotypes. We don't have a whole lot of them, so I remember those.
But, so I imagine that a high level of kind of organizational skill and kind of information tracking capability is really important for being a collections manager. So for any of our like folks that are watching this, students that might be interested in pursuing paleontology in museums and collections as part of their career or part of their academic trajectory, do you have any tips and pointers, things they can work on to kind of prepare for that kind of career path?
Okay, so my advice as like a grad student and someone who, as a professional now, you need to get a good organization system at the beginning. Like, don't think, oh, I'll just do this for now and then I'll figure out something better later. No, you won't. That is not how that works. Like, the only reason you'll come up with a better system is because the first one catastrophically failed, and I do not recommend that. So I was in that position when I was a grad student, right? Like, I tried to be really well organized, but I didn't quite know what sort of information I was going to need from like the pictures or whatever that I was taking. And so I organized them in a way I thought that made sense, and I was wrong. So partway through, I had to redo everything. And that's something that I've run into here. So there really hasn't been a lot of collections oversight during the lifetime of the museum. So there was not really a paleontology collections manager before, 2017? So, and 2017 to 2020 was spent basically overhauling and doing things for grants. So I am only just now getting to the things that have been a problem, an organizational problem for 30, 40 years, which is exciting. So yeah, basically highly recommend just being familiarizing yourself with kind of like best practices for organization. Like, that is something that I did not learn until the end of my PhD, which is very frustrating because like I didn't really have a chance to apply it, but I'm definitely applying it now. So just getting a good handle on how to organize your data, how to name your data, how to properly back up your data. I did have catastrophic failure with my data. My hard drive with all of my dissertation research died in January 2020. Yeah, I had to get it professionally backed up. That was traumatizing. Don't recommend. 0 out of 10. But like, it was because I fundamentally misunderstood what a backup needs to be. So, because fun fact, hard drives will fail.
Yeah.
They will. It's just a matter of when. I thought that if I was like really careful with it, that it would last forever. No, that's not how that works. But yeah, so just having an understanding of like good practice, what makes a good file name, what makes a good file structure. And it's really funny because like, this is something that I have been super into my whole life. I've always really liked organizing things. Like, spreadsheets are my friend. Spreadsheets are not databases though. Like, just organizing things, like color coding things, putting things in numerical order, alphabetical order, whatever. That is something that truly speaks to me. And I know that many people cannot relate. So if that is not something that do you think is interesting, yeah, I would not recommend being a collections manager, because not being organized just means that you're going to have a harder time in the future.
Chaos.
Yes.
And sadness.
Yes. I am dealing with the chaos and sadness of, yeah, like decades of multiple people doing parts of a job and trying to sort it all together. So like shout out to like the collections managers who like did put a big band-aid on it in like the last 5 years or so, but there's still so much. I found blueprints to paint to buildings on campus in one of my desks here. I don't know why. I don't need them.
That's not something you're in charge of?
No. I put it in the not my problem pile, which is my favorite pile.
Get it out.
Yes, make it go away.
Well, Dr. Baumgartner, thank you so much for talking with us. Before we go, do you have any other words of wisdom you'd like to share, or cool collections facts for folks that are watching this today?
Okay, I will give a fact and just a general piece of advice. So, cool fact is that it's something that is probably a little bit more common knowledge, I think, but I will tell people regardless. We have, in vertebrate paleontology, we have roughly 200 specimens up on exhibit from vertebrate paleontology. We have 20,000 specimens in vertebrate paleontology. 200 on exhibit, 200 on exhibit to 20,000 in the collection. So most of the things in a museum are down here with me. Like only a very small percentage of them are up available to the public. And so that's why having someone down here to organize things is important. The second thing that I kind of want to mention is that one of the things I really enjoy about my job is the fact that I am not infrequently contacted by, sometimes it's high schoolers, but undergrads and grad students asking me, hey, tell me about your job. Like, how do I get a job like that? What do you do? And I really enjoy that because I like being very visible to people like on the internet and that sort of thing, just to like talk about what kind of job I have, because I didn't really see anybody being there's not a whole lot of vocal paleontology collections managers. I think I can think of like 2 off the top of my head. And there's a lot more than that in museums. And so just being another person to be like, hey, this is another way that you can be a paleontologist, I think is really useful. So if there is a paleontologist who has a cool job, like it's okay to ask them questions, like contact them and be like, hey, I like what you do. How do I get to do things like that? Because a lot of us really do like answering these questions.
And you're very active on Twitter and kind of talk with folks on there. We'll make sure that your name on Twitter gets put down underneath your screen right there so people can come find you. Okay, well, we're going to head over to our next visitor. It was lovely talking to you, and we'll see you later.
See you later.
Thanks for joining me for this new episode of A New Way to Museum. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for new episodes every week. If you'd like to visit our virtual museum yourself, you can do so via the link in the description below this video. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for joining us in A New Way to Museum with the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for notifications when we release a new video. Support us on Patreon for early access and exclusive content. You can also follow us on all our social media. Links are found in the description. Thanks for watching, and follow your curiosity to new discoveries.